Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to your online lecture series of W222 microprocessor systems. This is the third lecture of week 13, your lecture number 39, and in this lecture we are going to discuss the enhanced capture compare PWM module, the ECCP module, and the ADC peripheral, the analog to digital conversion peripheral in Picatinny F4550 microcontroller. So let's go to the datasheet. Section 16 of your datasheet is about the enhanced capture compare PWM module. In Picatinny F4550, the CCP1, the capture compare PWM1, is implemented as a standard CCP module with enhanced PWM capabilities. So in this case, we can use this CCP module, CCP1 module only, in either the regular mode or the enhanced mode. So here first off, let me tell you that at this point there is an error in this datasheet. This specific register, this should have been ECCP1 con register, not CCP1 con register. So in ECCP1 con register, the first two bits that were unimplemented in the CCP1 con register are now implemented. The rest of the 6 bits are same as compared to the CCP1 con register. So you can either use it in regular mode or enhanced mode, one at a time. You cannot use CCP1 in both regular or advanced mode at the same time. And we will see that the regular mode is already covered inside the enhanced mode. So first let's revise what was in the regular mode. The capture and compare are okay. They are same in both CCP and ECCP modules. Only the difference lies in PWM mode. So what was happening in the regular mode of CCP1? In PWM mode, a single waveform was being generated by one module. So at one pin, we could generate a pulse width modulated waveform by setting the time period and the duty cycle of that PWM, and just run the timer 2 associated with this peripheral, and the waveform started to appear on the pin. Which pin? CCP1 had RC2 associated with that. So pin RC2 was made an output port, and a waveform was generated, a pulse width modulated waveform was generated on RC2. In case of enhanced mode, this is targeted for specifically motor control and full bridge, half bridge configurations that can be used in buck boost converters also. And we know that in full bridge and half bridge circuit configurations, we don't have just one input. We have 2 to 4 inputs in full bridge or half bridge configurations. But in case of regular mode, the PWM was generating only one PWM output. So the ECCP mode takes care of that, and in this mode, the only advancement is that it has 3 more bits associated with it, and we can generate up to 4 different signals at a time using this module for a complete full bridge input control. So first let's see the CCP1, the ECCP1 con register. The first 2 bits that were unimplemented, they are now implemented, and they configure this ECCP module in different modes. We can select between 4 modes using these 2 pins. Which 4 modes? If we set these pins to 0, 0, our ECCP module will be configured as a regular mode. Only the P1A pin will be modulated. There will be a single output, and the rest of the 3 pins will be used as the regular port pins. So this 0, 0 is just the regular mode of the ECCP module. Only one output will be generated. But when these 2 bits are configured as 0, 1, the ECCP module will be configured to support a full bridge operation and full bridge output forward. In this case, one output will be modulated, one will be active, and the rest two will be inactive. In case of 1-1, it will be full bridge reverse. So now these two outputs that were inactive in forward mode, they will become active, one of them will be modulated, and the rest of two, those were active in the forward mode, they will now be inactive in the reverse mode. And then finally 1-0 configures this as half bridge output. So two pins will be modulated with a deadband control, and two pins will be assigned as regular input output ports. They will not be assigned as a CCP output. The next 2 bits, they are same, the next 4 bits, they are same, but we discussed the 1100 configuration of these 4 bits only in the regular mode. So in the enhanced mode, the rest of the 3 combinations are also available, and they are used to configure the pins as active high or active low. For example, in this mode, if we see here the full bridge output forward mode, the P1D is modulated and P1A is active. Active high or active low, that is decided using these 4 combinations. And now we are going to see that what is the forward mode, what is the reverse mode, what is active high, what is the use of active high, active low, etc. So we will see the block diagrams of full bridge and half bridge operations. Sorry. First, let's start with the half bridge mode. You can see here, you already know what is a half bridge. They are 2 transistors connected in a half bridge configuration. Both of these are enabled when a 1 is given at this gate terminal or the base terminal. So when a 1 is given, this transistor becomes on and the current starts flowing through this transistor. If a 1 is given at this transistor, it will become on and the current starts flowing through this transistor. Now let's see what if both of these transistors become on at the same time. This will be short circuit and this will be short circuit, and the splice, the V plus and V minus, will become short circuit. So the first thing is, we don't want these 2 transistors to become on at the same time when they are being operated in a half bridge mode. So whenever this transistor is on, we want this transistor to be off, and whenever this is off, we want this to be on. And this is a push-pull configuration. So in case of push-pull configuration that is used in buck boost converters, you will be required to turn the transistors on alternatively. If there is a 1 at the base of the upper transistor, there should be a 0 at the base of the lower transistor, and vice versa. So in case of half bridge mode, what our ECCP module will do is, it will automatically generate a PWM at this transistor, and it will automatically generate an inverted PWM on this transistor. So these 2 PWMs will be nothing else, just an inverted version of each other. Plus there will be an additional dead band between them. Let me go to the dead band first. This is the dead band here, this TD, this portion, this is the dead band. What is a dead band? Dead band is when both the transistors are off, and it is a safety measure to make sure that when one transistor is turning off and the other transistor is turning on, there is an on-off time, the physical on-off time that is associated with to turn on or off each transistor. So to make sure that at any moment both the transistors do not turn on at the same time, we intentionally induce a dead band, a precautionary time at which both the transistors will be off, and then the waveform will be inverted. So you can see here that at this point P1A is 0 and P1B is 1, then there is this dead band, then A is 1 and B is 0, and then there is this dead band, and then A is 0, B is 1, and so on. So these two waveforms, they are nothing but inverse of each other, and these are generated automatically. We don't have to do anything. We will just set the duty cycle, we will just set the time period, we will just set the mode in which I want to operate it. I will just set even the dead band, how much dead band I want to give between these two transitions through a register by putting a value into the register and just turn on, and this waveform will be generated. It will keep generating until I turn it off. So that is very simple and that is very easy to use. So this is the half bridge mode, in which we have two outputs that are inverse of each other. In case of a full bridge mode, we have 4 transistors. They are connected in the form of a full H bridge, and the load is connected here at the center. Let's suppose that this load is a motor. What happens if A and D turn on at the same time? The current will flow from here to here to here and finally to here. This would be the current path, and the motor will rotate clockwise. And when I want to rotate this motor anti-clockwise, what I can do? I can turn off these transistors and I can turn on QC and QB transistors, and then the current path will be from here to here to here and then finally to the ground. So the motor will rotate in counterclockwise direction. This means that if we are able to turn on these transistors, the transistors in cross at a same time, we can select the direction of the motor. And to control the speed of the motor, we can send a PWM on this transistor instead of just turning it on. If we are just turning it on, that would be considered as a 100% duty cycle. And if we are giving a duty cycle of, let's say, 50%, so only for 50% of the time this transistor will be on and the motor speed will be reduced effectively to 50%. At a particular moment, when any two transistors in cross are active, with one having a PWM on that and the other is continuously on, the rest of the two should be inactive. And that is what's happening in our data sheet. If we see here, in a full bridge forward mode, the D is modulated and A is active. So here we can see that the D is modulated and the A is active. So one is completely on, this path is 100% always on, and this is modulated. So even by modulating just one of them, we can control the speed. And in the full bridge reverse mode, B is modulated, C is active, and the other two are inactive. So B is modulated, C is active, and the A and D are inactive. So we can control the speed of the motor also by setting the duty cycle, and we can control the direction of the motor also by selecting between these two modes. Now one question here is that if I want to change my speed of the motor frequently, I can just update the value of the duty cycle register. But if I want to change the direction of my motor frequently, do I have to write to this CCP con register again and again? I don't have to. If we note here, if we carefully observe that 01 is full bridge forward and 11 is full bridge reverse. So if I just set one value of this ECCP1 con register and later I only change this single bit, see this 0 is going to change to 1 and this 1 will remain constant. So if I only update the value of P1M1 bit, I can easily switch directions between forward or reverse. Now coming to these four, what is the purpose of active high and active low? Simple, very simple. All of these transistors here are n-type transistors. So an n-type transistor turns on when a 1 is given at the base or the gate terminal. A p-type transistor turns on when a 0 is given at the base or the gate terminal. So if we have an H bridge that has all the n-type transistors, we will use these configurations, all active high. If we have an H bridge with 2 n-type and 2 p-type transistors, we will use the configuration here when 2 of them are active high and 2 of them are active low. And if we have an H bridge in which all of them are p-type transistors, then we will use this last configuration where all of them are active low. So this module is taking care of my hardware circuit design also. It is so much optimized that it is giving me each and every option, whatever type of hardware circuit I have designed using different types of transistors for my H bridge motor control. This is handling that. I will just have to configure it once and it will do the rest. So this is the ECCP module. There is one thing more that we can discuss in this one. In your data sheet, it is given that you can use the half bridge output to control a full bridge. Here you can see that. As we know that we can set this pin, this transistor, as permanently on and give a PWM on this transistor, and it will effectively control the speed of this motor or the intensity of this load. But what if we give PWM to both of them? Would it make any difference? No, it will not. So we can give a PWM on both of these transistors. Similarly, when this transistor is on, this will be off. So when we are giving alternate the inverted waveforms to these transistors, we are effectively using a half bridge mode to control a full bridge, but in a push-pull mode. You will use it in power electronics hopefully. For motor control, this option, this approach is suitable. So these are the different modes associated with ECCP. Let's write a program to further clarify the options we have. So in this program, what we are going to do is we are going to configure the CCP1 module in enhanced mode, in a full bridge mode, with all the pins configured as active high, and we are also going to use an external interrupt. A push button will be installed with that external interrupt, and whenever a push button is pressed, we will change the direction of the motor. So let's try to make a code. As we will be using interrupt, I have already copied an empty interrupt service routine here and an empty main function here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to send some values in the ECCP1 con register. We are going to use it in a full bridge mode, so we will set 0 1 for the first two, then 0 0 for the next two, and then 1 1 0 0 for the last 4 bits to configure it as all active high. So let's move ECCP1 con is equal to 0B 01 00 1100. Then timer 2 is also associated with this, as we know already. So what should be the value of T2 con? All zeros. We have already discussed it. So T2 con is equal to 0B 0000 0000. Then what else do we want? Make all those 4 pins as output. So what are those 4 pins? Let me tell you here that 3 of those pins are RD 5, 6 and 7, and the one pin that associated with this ECCP module is the same, RC2. So we want to set RC2 as an output. We want to set TRISC-D5 as an output, TRISC-D6 as an output, and TRISC-D7 as an output. These are the 4 pins A, B, C and D associated with this ECCP module. What else do we want? We want to use an external interrupt. The external interrupt was associated with which bit? TRISC-B0. So we want to set port B0 as the input. Then what we want is, we want to enable the interrupts. So global interrupt enable is equal to 1 and int 0 IE is equal to 1. External interrupt is enabled now, the external interrupt 0. We don't have to enable the peripheral interrupt in this case. T2con is set, ECCP is set. What's left is setting the time period. So PR2 is equal to 249, the same value that we used in our previous lecture, and the duty cycle CCPR1L is equal to 30, a very low duty cycle. And I'll show you why I am using this, because I'm going to burn it on the hardware, and I'm going to show you the intensity of the LED. So I have to choose a very small value for this one. The last thing we want to do is to turn the timer on. TMR2 on is equal to 1. That's it. The main loop is complete. So what we want to do in the ISR, whenever the interrupt comes, we want to change the direction of the motor from forward to reverse or reverse to forward. So we have to change the P1 M1 bit. So whenever the interrupt comes, I will just complement the bit P1 M1 and I will clear the flag INT0 IF while exiting the loop. I think this code is complete. Let's try to build it. The build has failed. The error is here, shown here. This is the error. Let's click on the error. I have used a small case in TMR2 on. So let's try to build it again. The build is successful. Now we will simulate it on Proteus and we will also run it on hardware. This is your Proteus simulation. This button is connected to the external interrupt 0, and these 4 ABCD are connected to the ABCD of ECCP output. So let's simulate it. This is your output waveform. You can see here that the D is being modulated, A is high, you can see here this red light, and B and C are low, they are inactive. So once I press this button, what it should do is, it should deactivate A and D, both should go low. It should activate one of B and C, and it should modulate the other. So let's press the button and here it goes. So let me change the trigger source to B. Here we can see that B is being modulated, C is high, active, and A and D are inactive. So we have successfully generated a 4-bit output for a full bridge control. And let me burn it on the hardware also, and I will show it in the camera. I hope you will be able to see the intensity of the LED. So here is our hardware. You can see that 2 lights are on. One is RC2 and one is the A. If you can see here that this LED is more bright when compared to this one. Let me press the button. It should switch them between B and D. and you can observe here that the lower LED, this LED, the LED on the right has more brightness than the LED on the left. So the left one is being modulated and the right one is active high. And when I press the button again, the RB0, the external interrupt, it will switch again. So this LED, the LED on the right is being modulated, it is dimmer, while the LED on the left is active high, so it is 100% on. So this means that we have successfully built and burnt our code on the hardware also for a full bridge control. So now your capture compare module and the enhanced capture compare module is complete, and now we will move on to the ADC module. Alright, so coming to our last peripheral, that is analog to digital converter. You all know about ADCs. ADCs convert some analog value into digital value. For example, if we have an analog value of 0 to 5 and we have an ADC of 8 bit, the value will be converted from that 0 to 5 analog value to a digital value of 0 to 255. So 0 in digital will represent 0 in analog, and 255 in digital will represent 5 in analog, and 128 in digital will represent 2.5 volts in analog. What we are going to focus in this lecture is how we are going to configure this built-in peripheral, this built-in ADC peripheral of PicketENF4550 to get some analog value and to convert it into digital, and how to use that digital value in our program. So the PicketENF4550 has an ADC that has a 10-bit digital number. So any analog input will be converted into a 10-bit digital value. 10-bit can count from 0 to 1024, 1024. Any analog value will be converted from 0 to 1024 using this module. The second thing is that there are 13 channels in this ADC module. So it can take up to 13 analog inputs and it can convert into digital one by one. Those 13 channels cannot operate at a time. So there is only one ADC, the converter itself is just one. It can be multiplexed with 13 pins. So we can activate 13 pins and we can then one by one switch between them. If I can go to the block diagram, here there are 13 pins and we can enable any of them, and then this 10-bit converter ADC will convert that analog value into the digital value. Analog to digital control registers will allow us to choose which analog channels we are going to activate, and then out of those activated channels I am going to convert the data on which analog pin to digital. So there are two things. There can be maximum 13 channels, but we don't have to configure all of them as analog inputs. We may want to use only 2 channels and we want to use the rest of the 11 pins as digital input outputs. So we can first configure out of those 13 pins how many channels do I need. First I will configure that using a separate control, and then out of those activated channels, which channel is going to be converted to digital. So this is a two-step process. We have 3 control registers associated with ADC. The ADCON 0, AD analog to digital, CON control 0, ADCON 0 register, ADCON 1 register and ADCON 2 register. So starting with the ADCON 0 register, this register allows us to choose between the already activated channels. Now let's assume all of these 13 channels from 0 to 1 were activated and they were configured as analog inputs, not the digital inputs. And then out of those 13 activated channels, which channel do I want to read is selected by using these 4 pins, CHS0 to CHS3, channel select 0 to channel select 3. Which channel I am going to read now? The first 2 bits are unimplemented, so we have already covered the 6 pins of this control register. Then the next pin is go/done bar. This is a control bit and a status bit at the same time. This bit is accessed by the label godone, G-O-D-O-N-E. So when I am writing to this pin, this is a control bit, and when I am reading this pin, this is a status bit. Go means whenever I set this pin to 1, the analog conversion starts. Now the analog conversion takes some time. Even the data acquisition takes some time. So the analog conversion is a 2-step process. In the first step, the data is acquired, the analog data is read, whatever analog value is present on the physical pin that is loaded inside the microcontroller. So that is the data acquisition. That data acquisition takes some time. And why we want to save that value? Because maybe the analog value is changing continuously on the pin. So if we want to convert a value at a certain instant, we have to just take this value, pick this value and store it somewhere, so that even if the value on the pin is changing during that time, it should not affect our analog to digital conversion. So the first step is data acquisition. The data acquisition takes some time, and once the value is stored, that analog value is stored, then the conversion starts to convert that analog value into the digital value, and that conversion also takes some time. So when I say go, when I set this pin go done to 1, what it will do is it will just capture the value, and then after capturing the value it will start conversion. And once the conversion is finished, this pin will be automatically set to 0. And after I set it to 1 as a control bit, the conversion starts, and at the same moment this pin is automatically converted into a status bit, and that status bit is automatically cleared once the conversion is finished. So this is a dual purpose pin. And then finally we have the AD on, the analog to digital converter module enable disable pin. If we want to use the analog to digital converter module, we want to enable it and we will set this add on pin to 1, otherwise we will disable the ADC module and we will set it to 0. The steps we will be following is, we will configure this ADC using the other 2 registers as well. We will discuss that now. Then we will set the go done pin to 1, and then we will keep polling the status of this pin. We will keep checking whether it has now automatically become 0 or not. And once it has become 0, we know that now the conversion is finished. So now the converted data is available somewhere, and we can read that digitally converted data and we can use it anywhere we want to. So this is now a flag. And also, just like other peripherals, ADC also has an interrupt enabled. So we don't have to manually check this pin. We can enable an interrupt for ADC, and the interrupt will check that pin for us and will raise an interrupt flag, that is ADIF flag, and we can go to the ISR once the conversion is finished. Then moving on to the ADCON1 register. The ADCON1 register has again the first 2 bits unimplemented. I'll talk about these next 2 pins after these 4 pins. So let's first talk about these 4 pins, PCFG0 to PCFG3. These 4 pins are used to configure the pins as analog pins or digital pins. So we have 16 different combinations available. We can only choose between one of these combinations. We can set all the channels as analog inputs. We can set some of them as digital and some of them as analog, and we can also choose some of them as analog inputs, but we can associate them with the reference voltage. So now coming on to these 2 bits, VCFG0 to VCFG1. These 2 bits, they are the voltage reference bits. Normally we are using our microcontroller from 0 volts to 5 volts to power that up. So the VDD is 5 volts and VSS is 0 volts in our case. And if we set both of these pins to 0, the VDD will be taken as the positive reference value, and the VSS will be automatically taken as the negative reference value. So the ADC, that analog input, that will be converted from 0 to 5 to 0 to 1024. But let's assume that the analog input we were trying to read had a value that was only changing from, let's say, 1 to 3 volts. We already we have some kind of device that has an analog output, and that output ranges from 1 volts to 3 volts only. Now if we do not choose the reference values, if we do not set our separate reference values, we are compromising the accuracy. For example, if we have a 0 to 5 volt input, it is converted into 0 to 1024 in digital value, and 0 to 1024 digital means that 5 volts are divided into 1024 levels, with each level equal to approximately 4.88 millivolts. But what if I had an input of 1 to 3 volts and that was converted to 0 to 1024? What will be the resolution I will get? I will get a resolution of 3 minus 1 divided by 1024. So the resolution will be approximately 1.95 millivolts. Substantially increased resolution can be achieved in this case. If I set the negative V reference to 1 volts and positive V reference to 3 volts, only then I can achieve this resolution. Otherwise, if I have the negative Vref to 0 volts and positive Vref to 5 volts, I will get the same resolution, and the area from 0 to 1 volts and from 3 to 5 volts, all of that will be wasted because our input is not going into those levels even. So it is very crucial in case of your sensing devices. If you have some analog sensors, you have to see what is the total output range of that sensor. So if that sensor's range is different from 0 to 5 volts, it is recommended to change the Vref plus and Vref minus values. And how to change that? Using these two configuration pins, VCFG0 and VCFG1. So Vref minus in that case will be manually connected by us to the AN2 pin, and Vref plus will be manually connected by us to the AN3 pin to increase the resolution of the ADC conversion. It will be crucial in control applications where the accuracy is very important. So the ADCON 1 register is complete, and finally we have the ADCON 2 register. Starting with bit 0 of the ADCON2 register, we have these 3 pins ADCS0 to ADCS2, that is the analog to digital convergence clock select bits. How much time we want to give to the ADC to convert our analog value to the digital value, we can choose between different options. So it depends upon your input analog input sampling time, and then the acquisition time can be selected from 0 TAD to 20 TAD. So now what we will be going to do is we will be going to use the minimum acquisition time assigned to this this ADC conversion and minimum conversion time assigned to this ADC. Then this bit number 7 is bit number 6 is unimplemented, and the last bit, that is ADFM. As I said that this ADC is a 10-bit ADC, but the registers in our PIC microcontroller, they are all 8-bit registers. So where are the rest of the 2 bits? Either there has to be a separate register for that, or those 2 bits should be somewhere in another register, just like we discussed in case of the CCP PWM mode. In this case, those 2 bits, they are in a separate register. So this ADC has 2 8-bit registers. Those 2 8-bit registers are combined to form one 16-bit register. But the data that ADC is giving us is only 10 bits. So where that data will be placed? Let's see, this is your lower register and this is your higher register. These registers are labeled as ADRESH and ADRESL. These are 2 8-bit registers, 0 to 7 and then 8 to 16. But our number is only 10 bits. So that number can be placed either here or that number can be placed here. 2 bits of address H can be used and 8 bits of address L can be used, or 2 bits of address L can be used and 8 bits of address H can be used. So in the first case, in this case, we call the data to be left justified. The MSB is completely present inside the address H, and the LSB, the 2 LSBs are present in the address L. So this is left justified. And in the second case, where 8 bits are present in the address L and 2 bits are present in the address H, the LSB is present in the address L and 2 MSBs are present in the address H, and we call it right justified. So we have 2 options to justify our data. We can left justify it or we can right justify it. For our application, if we are going to use only 8-bit mode and we can ignore the 2 bits, which bits we want to ignore? The most significant bits or the least significant bits? What if we are not interested in a very accurate ADC conversion, but if we only want to use 8 bits of data? Which 8 bits of data we would like to use? The most significant data or the least significant data? Obviously, we want to use the most significant data. We can ignore the least significant bits. So the left justified option, the left justified configuration suits us if we want to configure our ADC in an 8-bit mode. So what we will do is we will just set this ADC in the left justified mode, and we will just ignore these 2 LSBs. Even if there is some error, we don't care, we are not bothered about that. So this ADFM format select bit will let us choose between the right justified or left justified mode. If we are using all the 10 bits of the data, then in some cases it is easier for us to use the right justified format. for further processing of the data, but we are not discussing that today. So these are the 3 ADCON registers, and we are going to use them today to read an analog input at a certain pin and display the digital value on the output port, that is port D. So let's start our program. This is an empty main function and there is an empty interrupt service routine. So first things first, which pins we want to use as inputs and which pins we want to use as outputs. We want to display our data on port D, so we will set our port D as output. Then we want to use the analog input 0 only at this point. Only one pin will be configured as an analog input, and that is AN0, that is at tris A0, and I will configure it as an input. Then let's start the configuration. All of these channels should be 0 because we are selecting the channel 0. Then the go down will be 0 and add on will be 1. So ADCON 0 is equal to 0B 00000001. Then ADCON 1 is equal to 0B. We are currently using VDD and VSS as our reference voltages. So all the first 4 pins are 0, and then we are going to configure only one input as an analog input, that is this second last option 1110. So we will load it with 0000 and 1110, and then finally ADCON 2 is equal to left justified 0, and then all of these other bits are also 0, 0B 00000000. So our ADC configuration is now done. What else do we want to do? We want to enable the ADC interrupt because we don't want to poll that go down status bit manually. So for that we want to enable the global interrupt enable, PEIE peripheral interrupt enable, and ADIE analog to digital interrupt enable. Now these interrupts are enabled. The last thing to do in the main loop is to set the go done pin to 1. Now the conversion has been started, and then I will wait until the conversion is finished, and as soon as the conversion is finished an interrupt will come, and I want to display that converted value onto the port D. But before that I want to clear the ADIF flag that caused the interrupt. Then I will display the value of ADRESH to port D, and before leaving this loop I want to again start the next conversion to continuously keep getting the data, and then I will exit the loop, and as soon as I exit the loop I will again start here, start waiting here. So whenever the next conversion is finished I will again go to this loop, and this process will continue. I can even move this flag clear to this point, but the flag should be cleared before again starting the conversion, not after starting the conversion. So first the flag is cleared and then the next conversion is started. So let's build this program. The build is successful, and now let's try to simulate it in Proteus. So here I have my analog input that is now set to 3.3 volts. So first let's calculate what should be my value at port D when a 3.3 volt input was applied at the analog 0 input. 3.3 divided by 5 into 255 is equal to 168.3, and going to the programmer mode I will convert 168 into binary number 10101000 plus minus 1, because it is not that accurate as we are using only 8 bits, not the 10 bits. So let's start the simulation and let's see what is the value on port D. Port D has a value of 10101000 as expected. Now let's change that value, this input value, to 2.5 volts and then simulate it again. So what should be expected? 128, half of this register. So this MSB should be 1 and the other pins should be 0. So our ADC is working perfectly fine as expected. So this is it for the ADC module. Now, as the final thing of this lecture, let me combine the program I made just before. Let me open that program, the program we wrote for the ECCP module, and let's combine these two to get the duty cycle of that ECCP waveform from the ADC. So in this case, in case of the ECCP, my port D was configured as the output, my TRIS C2 was configured as an output, my TRIS B0 was configured as an input. I had to set the value of ECCP1 con. This is the same value. I am copying this value from our previous code. I had to set some value of timer 2 control register. So let's copy it from the previous code. Then I had to set some time period and the duty cycle, and then I had to turn on the timer, turn on the ADC conversion and wait. In addition, I was enabling the external interrupt in addition to the ADC interrupt. So int 0IE is also 1 now. And what we were doing when the external interrupt came was, let's write it here, we were just changing the direction of the motor. So P1M1 was toggled, it was complemented, and then the flag was cleared. So now we have two sources of interrupts. So what do I have to do? I have to write an if condition. If int 0IF is equal to 1, then do this, and if ADIF is equal to 1, then do this. And if ADIF was 1, what we want to do now? We don't want to display it on the port. We want to update the duty cycle based on that. So where is the duty cycle located? CCPR1L. What this program will do is, whenever the interrupt comes from the ADC, it will go to the ADC, it will copy the value of this address H and it will put it inside the CCPR1L register that is defining the duty cycle of our PWM. And whenever the interrupt comes because of the external interrupt, because of the push button, it will change the direction of the motor. So I think these configurations are okay now. Let's try to build it. It has compiled without any error. Let's simulate this code. So what are we expecting right now? 2 pins as deactivated as 0, 1 pin as high and 1 pin with PWM, and the duty cycle of that PWM will be dependent upon this input value. So right now this is 50% input, so I am expecting a 50% duty cycle on that single pin. So let's simulate it. Now here we can see that 1 pin is high, 2 pins are low, and there is a 50% duty cycle waveform on the other pin. If I press this button, this 50% duty cycle waveform will be shifted to the port E, and port C will be high and A and D will become inactive. So let's change the duty cycle. Let's connect a potentiostat instead of this analog input source, or let me even do a more interesting thing. Let me change this DC source to an AC source, to a sine wave. Let's connect this sine wave here, and the amplitude is maximum, the peak amplitude is 5 volts in my case, and then the offset is 0, the frequency is 1 Hertz. So the analog value is continuously changing in this case. So what should happen to our PWM is, its duty cycle will keep changing, and we have a specific term for that. Let me simulate it and let's see if it is working, and then I will tell you. So you can see here, isn't it interesting? The duty cycle is changing, continuously changing with the input frequency. Let me increase the frequency and then let's see what are the results. So the peak amplitude is 5 volts, the frequency is, let's say, 100 hertz, and let's simulate it again. So if you see here, let me here, its duty cycle is very small at the beginning because the sine waves amplitude is very small, and then it is slowly increasing, and now see here it is slowly increasing and then it is decreasing again. So the pulse width of our PWM is being modulated according to the input analog sine wave, and this particular waveform, this green waveform that is being shown here at your screens right now, is called an SPWM, a sine pulse width modulation, and this is extensively used in your inverters, in your push-pull converters, in your buck-boost converters, and so on. When you are using the UPS in your home, you may have heard that this UPS is a sine wave UPS and this UPS is a square wave UPS. So in case of square wave UPS, there is a continuous hum and the square wave damages your load. But in case of sine wave UPS, this form of output wave is being generated and then this is filtered to get a pure sine wave. So this is very friendly for your electrical appliances. So these things, these peripherals are very interesting and they have extensive use in many of your future applications, ranging from power electronics to robotics, controls, etc. So you will be using these peripherals, these features extensively in your future projects. So this is it for our ADC and ECCP module. I hope you have understood these concepts and you have learned some interesting concepts in these lectures. Again, if you have any questions, any queries, confusions related to these lectures, you want more detail about that, you are free to contact me via Microsoft Teams week 13 and I would be more than happy to answer. Your assignment will be uploaded soon and we will have an interactive session next, because these 4 or 5 lectures, these 4 or 5 previous lectures will raise a lot of questions from the students and I would love to answer them. So let's schedule an interactive session soon. See you in the next session. Till then, stay safe, take care. Allah Hafiz.